Matters. My name is Dr. Sharon Norris Elliott, and today I have the absolute honor. I am just giddy over who my guests are today. As you see, Lady Laura is not with us today. She is on a much needed vacation with her husband. And that is so nice. They had a chance to, have a getaway. And I was going to be here all by myself. So I decided to invite two of my favorite people in the world. Now, I have never been around the world, but I'm telling you still, these are two of my favorite people in the world, and these are my sons. Matthew is my eldest, my firstborn, and Mark is the next guy. They are only 21 months apart in age, and they are just amazing. And so I decided to name this show Family Legacy Entrepreneurial Focus. And you'll see why as soon as we start talking. So let me first introduce Matthew to you. Matthew, say hello to the people.
Hello, everyone.
And then Mark.
Hey.
Okay.
Hey.
Now, Matthew is in I always get it mixed up.
West
Matthew.
Hollywood.
West Hollywood. I had it right this time. West Hollywood, California. And Mark is in New Orleans, Louisiana. And so I can get to Matthew like hands-on if I need to in a second. But Mark would also be here for me, right? In a second if I needed him. And Mark is my son who is married and he has 3 children. So my grandchildren are all the way in New Orleans. So I hope everybody watching this show is now feeling sorry for me because they are so far away from me. But I have to fly out there every so often to be with them. So thank you guys for being with me today. And here's another cool thing. If you are watching this show live, this show is being taped right before Mother's Day. I didn't even think about that until I got out here today. And so this is a huge Mother's Day gift also for me because the best thing I would love for every Mother's Day is to just be with my boys. So we're talking about entrepreneurship. And one of the many things that I'm very proud of my boys about is that both of them own their own businesses. And I've spoken about this before. I don't know if I've made a big enough deal with them for them to know that this is a family legacy. I only know my family history, our family history, back as far as my grandfather, who I never met, my father's father, so my paternal grandfather. They lived in Maryland, near Baltimore, and Maryland is considered the northernmost southern state. So once you get past Maryland, you're out of the South, all right? So think about the South in the United States in the late 1800s. This Black man, my grandfather, had his own business. And that was just unheard of for Black people, like at that time. And so he owned his own business, and they were able, for example, by the time the stock market crashed in the late 20s and 30s, they were able to have, food and the other necessities and things because my grandfather had a business. So then pass that down to my dad, who was a college graduate. Once he moved to California, he got his doctorate. And so, but my dad, in order to continue to support his family and things like that, he had a photography business at one point. And, he would go out and do family portraits or weddings, or what have you. So in addition to the work that he was doing, he had another. So I guess he was an early person with a side hustle. He had his own business as a photographer. And you'll see kind of how that plays in with what Matthew has and he's doing. And so now we are, it's my generation and my next generation. And I'm so proud that we continue to have businesses. So, Matthew, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business, what it is that you do, just a little bit, because we're going to talk during this show and our next show about all that you're doing. So what is happening? What is your business, and kind of how did you come into it?
Yeah, my business is Rainbow Creative, and it's a full-service podcast production company. It started as a video, like, narrative marketing company back in 2018, and in 2020, I was asked by this company to produce a podcast, and I was like, sure, I can produce anything. And just the longest story short, fast forward to word of mouth and trying it, we've produced over 30 shows, and now it's a pretty thriving business.
Wow. So, okay, I'm going to come back to ask you some questions about exactly what you do. Okay.
Yeah.
But Mark, what is it that you're doing?
Yeah, so I own a pool cleaning company that started in my backyard. Yeah, honestly, started in my backyard. It's been going on 6 years now. I have 2 employees, and so we do everything from pool cleaning to equipment installs, drains, electrical work, plumbing, and all self-taught. I didn't teach myself, but I didn't go to school for this, so it kind of came out of need, out of necessity. Kind of tired of corporate America, and I just decided to take a chance on myself, and it just went. It went the way I wanted it to go.
Yeah. So you see, parents, you send them to college for one thing. But now, Mark, I'm gonna come back to you first, and tell us a little bit about how you even came up with the name of your. Oh, before you do that, I do have to jump in here and say, yes, I have a business as well. And I taught school for 35 years and actually started this as a part-time, I guess, sort of like my dad did the photography part-time before he went into the ministry. But my business, Authorized Me Literary Firm, consists of all the things I do for writers, editing, coaching, as well as I'm a literary agent. And so now I have my own business as well. So, Mark, I thought the funny thing that I wanted to tell everybody is that I thought it was hilarious that Mark's line of business that is supporting his family has to do with cleaning something. Okay. Because growing up with 2 boys who are completely opposite, but staunch brothers and all of that, but completely opposite, it was pulling all kinds of teeth trying to get Mark to clean up his room, and now he is living on cleaning things up. So anyway,
yeah. I think about that often. Like cleaning.
Right. God has a sense of humor. But Mark, I love the story of how you even came into this business.
Yeah.
How did it actually start?
Yeah. So one day I was at home, and my neighbor from across the street came and knocked on my door, and he was like, "Hey, man," this was before I was in the business. He said, "Hey, who cleans your pool?" And I said, I clean my own pool. And he was like, "Well, look, I'm not satisfied with my guy. And your pool is clean, it's clear. So how about you just come across the street when you can? I'll pay for all the chemicals, and I'll pay you the same amount that I pay him. And I know where you live, so it's not hard to find you. And that was my first account. It came to my door. I didn't come looking for it. It just came to my door, and I
Wow.
didn't even think about that in that moment. I didn't think about turning it into a business. It was just an extra $160 a month. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. It's extra money. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door, but that sparked the idea
Or how you got your
a couple
feet
years
wet.
later.
Ha ha. Okay.
Right. But that sparked the idea a couple years later that, oh, you already have something that you could do. You might as well go all in on this. So yeah, so that's the origin
Wow.
of it.
Wow. And I remember as my boys were growing up, there were all, and as I was teaching, because I taught teenagers, and I remember saying, you guys need to be able to do something with your hands.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay.
I remember that.
I still can't.
What, Matthew?
I still can't.
Oh, no. But
you
you are
I
doing
am.
something with
Yeah,
your
that's true.
hands.
You are.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
You're just on the digital side of it.
Right, that's true. I do a lot with my hands on the digital side. That's true.
Yeah.
I just
And
can't change a light bulb.
no, exactly. I know that part. I know
hire
that
people
part.
for that.
You gotta hire the guy, right? For that. But the point, being if somebody is not hiring you, right? How can you make money?
Right.
And when these guys were babies, I had a business sewing.
Yeah.
My mother taught me how to sew. And so when Matthew was getting ready to come along, I loved all the beautiful bedding that was in the stores, but I couldn't afford that. And so I got a pattern and I got fabric and I made it on my sewing machine. And then people came to the house. Oh, that is so lovely. Where did you get that? And I said, girl, I made that. Well, would you make one for me? Just like Mark, it was kind of like cha-ching.
Right. Yeah.
And so I started New Blessings Interiors and would make the bedding. Now, we're going to be kind of talking about how we got started doing things, and hopefully all of you watchers, right, all of you viewers are going to be able to pick up some tips on starting your business or thinking of what you do as a business, right? There are a lot of people, you do things that you don't even think of, just like Mark was saying, I clean my pool, right? You don't think of it necessarily at the beginning as a business, just like I didn't think of, okay, I'm sewing these things for my kid. But then it's necessary to realize that there are steps that now need to be taken if you're going to make this into a business, right? So Matthew, let me jump over to you right quick. I know you started out with film, right? And I think you still have that kind of in the back of your mind, but how did making films or directing films transfer into directing and producing podcasts?
Yeah, so I tried my hand at film, and I'm actually glad I'm not in the film industry because it is not doing well. People are leaving honestly, people are leaving the film industry now. They don't have jobs right now. The market is really hard. So if I had actually stayed in it, I may have been one of the lucky ones having work, which is really interesting. But we can talk about that like a different time. But my film experience, really film, I always just wanted to do something creative. And
Mm-hmm.
what got me into like Rainbow Creative and just making videos is when I worked at Disney in marketing. So I
Okay.
really loved that job because the film process is just so long. You know, you're
Mm.
waiting, it's a pitch process, you're waiting to get something. It's not actually stable income. You know, you may get like a big windfall on a project and you're always chasing the next project. So it's a constant
Okay.
hustle. So when I was working at Disney, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I can still be creating often and just making things, you know, multiple times a week. And I really love that quick production process.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What is a producer? I mean,
Yeah.
what?
So, right. Yeah. So a lot of people know director, the person who casts the vision for the project. And then a
Okay.
lot of people know as the writer, but the producer, they're the people, they're the boss. They hire the team.
Of course you are the boss.
They
Okay.
they oversee things. And a producer on a podcast is really like a director, actually. So a producer on a podcast has way more creative input. So they're
Mm.
both they're the people who keep it all together. So like a lot of the project management, everything from, you know, making sure that on my as an executive producer, I like negotiate the deals and all the finances, but then I hire a team for each project. So
Hmm.
for the team, you know, I'm overseeing them, I'm casting the vision, you know, I'm the voice with the client, you know, I'm there making sure the engineers are getting everything. I
Oh.
oversee the story producers who are writing, overseeing the researchers,
Mm-hmm.
and then the edit. Oftentimes, depending on the project, the producer can be in there making all the edit notes for it.
Mm.
But sometimes they oversee that with another producer, making sure it's published, even being involved in the strategy and marketing. So it's
Whoa.
really from A to Z. You're the
Mm-hmm.
boss of one project, and I'm doing it at scale of multiple projects. So I have multiple
Wow.
producers and editors and things like that. So the producer is really the boss, the nuts and bolts, the person who gets the money, makes sure it oversees, and at the end of the day, everybody reports to the producer. You know,
Okay. Wow.
so think of it
Okay.
that way. Think of it like a little CEO of a little company.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
you are a CEO.
And I'm CEO of a company and executive producer because I don't want to not be on set. I don't want to just be at my computer taking calls all day and looking at spreadsheets. I want to be in the field. I want to be like, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
in
And
it.
very
But
hands-on.
right, but I have to split up my time now because since I am running the business, I do have to take calls with like my
Yes.
operations team, and then I get to now I'm at a point where I get to choose the shows I want to be on, and I only have a handful that I'm more show running on set, and then the
Okay.
rest I just delegate to my team.
Yeah. Well, I have seen uh, some of your podcasts, and I've been behind the scenes as being a guest
Hmm.
on a show that you produced, and I'm like super impressed. Like that's my kid, like doing all that, and, hiring all these people, Whereas I'm just as impressed with what Mark does because I've been in his clean pool.
Nice.
And it's a wonderful thing. Take us back, Mark. You mentioned how you remember my saying, "Be able to do something with
Yeah.
your hands." Take me back, and I'm not just fishing because it might not be complimentary on what you're going to say, but watch out. But take me back to you guys, both of you guys, growing up
Mhm.
um, in a household where someone had an entrepreneurial bent, like I did. I mean, I was a teacher, but I was also doing other stuff.
Yeah,
Can
yeah, yeah. No, you were always doing things. You were always moving, always traveling, always speaking, and just I guess just being around that, not knowing, it's kind of you see the work, and you see how you can still have that work life balance, but still
Mhm.
do what you want to do. I remember, um, vividly, my first trip to Mount Hermon.
I remember that too. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
opened my
remember the plane
eyes.
ride and
Yeah.
everything. And I remember you were there, and when you walked in the door, everybody was just like how you said about Matthew. Everybody was just like, "Oh, this is Sharon. Sharon's here. Oh my God, Sharon is doing." And I was like, "My mom."
That's just mom.
Right, right, right. It's like I didn't see, you know, I've never at that point I didn't see the work. I
Mm,
just, saw the movement.
Okay.
Right. So growing up in a household like that, you didn't preach entrepreneurship to us. You just displayed it and you
Mhm.
showed it, and just your day to day action. And it was kind of like a things where, um, you know, it just seeing that
Mhm.
and what we do now, the ease of how, um, I move around and just like I don't get flustered by things a lot. I
Mhm.
guess it just came naturally just by watching you do it.
Oh,
And
praise the Lord.
it
Mm.
honestly, like, I didn't know that you were had businesses and things. Like, you just my mom. My
Exactly.
mom, you're my English teacher. Kind of what it and every now and then you had to fly out for a gig and you came back, but I didn't
Mhm.
really know you were making money. I just thought you were speaking,
Right.
but
Yeah.
you were making money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just just sitting back, just looking and seeing it. It just kind of, I
Hmm.
guess, one of those things where you're in it and you don't know you're in it, and
Yes.
it's just ingrained in you and you don't even realize it.
Well, that's cool. Matthew, do you feel kind of
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was that exposure that
mm,
just made it normal for me. It allowed me to just like achieve, even, today to when I was younger, I always wanted to be busy working on multiple things. So being at
mhm.
Mountain Hummers, I remember like I wanted to attend all the
Yeah.
different classes.
Yeah,
I
you
thought I wanted to be an author.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to be a person. I was in it. Like
yeah
I
you were
came and then
for
I was like, I am a conference attendee,
Right.
13 years old with my little
recognized
notebook
on
and
the back.
backpack.
You put a
Right.
notebook. Yeah, you put your own
Yeah.
notebook together and
I was writing
everything.
all the notes. I think I was buying the cassette tapes,
Yeah.
and listening to them afterwards,
And I need to
passing them
tell
my
you,
business cards.
I have to tell you, Matthew, to this day, I still come across people who remember you guys
Yeah.
at that conference, and they said, "And that little Matthew, he was just a conferee."
I was.
He
I
was.
had the lanyard. I kept the
He
lanyard
was.
afterwards.
That's so funny. I
Yep,
remember
I
now.
filled up my notebooks. I think for me, it's like it just became normal of what it was. So, I mean, I've had friends that told me like every time I've had a full time job, I've
Mhm.
always been unsatisfied because it wasn't what I was supposed to do, you know.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it
no,
was having
same.
those right. It was having those experiences that taught me how to run a business. Like I've worked at big companies and startups, and all the connections. The full circle of it all is the connections that I've had. My new
Yeah.
COO. I have a COO of my company, and he was my former boss 7 years ago.
Look at that.
Oh,
Look
you
at that.
hired your boss. Look at that. Now,
Yeah.
the funny thing is, the boys are saying like that I was out making money, but they were helping me because let me show you some of some of the books that have come from some of the things that are part of their life. So, my first parenting book was Raising Boys to Be Like Jesus. And I wanted my boys to know the Lord, of course, and so I looked at the life of Jesus and some of the things about his life and tried to incorporate them, into my boys. And when I signed this book, I signed it, Boys Like Jesus Become Men of God. But when I first started writing this book and I got the contract for the book, all I had in it were examples of Matthew and Mark. And my publisher said, doesn't anyone else have children, have sons? And I go, well, yeah. And then she said, and do your boys always do things right? Because that's all I had in the book. you know? And
No.
so I had to do a little bit of, I got the negative examples from other people. But anyhow, that aside, but because of them, I was able to look and say, there's some things. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I can look at the Word of God and see what I ought to do.
Mhm.
All right, and so that was the first parenting book. Then the second parenting book even has Matthew's picture on the cover.
That
Uh,
stock photo that won't
it
stop
was a stock
following
photo.
me.
It's a good picture.
I know.
Yeah, it
It's a
is.
good
Yeah,
picture. It's a
those are my two
stock
friends,
photo.
Julie and Bobo from college.
Yeah, one of his friends was just taking some pictures, and the publisher found this picture
Wow,
and said, "I think this would be great. It shows some,
they
millennials or
didn't know it
whatever."
was me.
And I said, "That's my son."
Oh wow, they didn't even know
They
that
didn't
was
even
you.
know. Wow.
No,
That's
they
wild.
didn't.
Wow.
That
And
was
all the
wild.
pictures on the internet, right?
Right,
Wow.
right.
That's
And so
crazy.
this one, Boomerangs to Arrows, a godly guide to launching young adult children. And we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that in our next show. The boys are going to stay for us to talk for the next show. So make sure you're watching this one. You're going to have to watch next week. And we'll talk a little bit about that whole launching because as you see, they don't live with me. Okay. And they both got on out and got on their own. And then the third parenting book didn't see that coming when how they're living is not how you raise them. Now, they're not the negative examples, once again, but your kids don't always do exactly all that you ask of them. And how do you handle that? How do you handle that? And so you guys know who watch this show. I'm about the very practical living for God, not living in a way that, oh, yes, I live for God and I'm a Christian. No, no. God meant for us to do exactly what he did. When Jesus came, he lived exactly like everybody else. Just he loved God and he showed us how to live in love with God. And that's all that we're trying to do here. So as we believe it or not, we're already at the end of our first show. So as we wrap up today, Matthew and Mark are going to stay. Thank you, fellas, for being with me here. But we're going to go on and continue our conversation, so you won't want to miss next week. We're going to continue our conversation about entrepreneurship, about passing things down in a legacy in your family and how important that is, and then also maybe some business tips that we've learned along the way. So I am Dr. Sharon Norris Elliott, and this has been Life That Matters, because your life matters for the kingdom.